All right. Well, thank you again for joining us for the next edition here of the Navigating the Coronavirus Economy series. And this is a continuation of our monthly webinar on what's happening in the world and franchise sales trends, marketing data. What do we see that's happening that may impact franchise lead generation, franchise sales, things that previous, past performance, economic data that could lead us to give us any kind of potential insight into what's happening right now in the world of franchise sales. So, what does all of that look like? What does it all mean? How can we interpret this data? So, I am by no stretch of the imagination an economist, but my goal is to help hopefully share with you this data and give some perspective and viewpoints on it and look at some relevant information to see how that applies to what's happening in the world today so that you can assess and take a look at that and see if this is something that is something for you to gather some additional information on and apply it to your business, to your franchise marketing, to your lead generation, whatever it is that it might be. By way of introduction, if this is your first time tuning in, my name is Tom DuFore. I'm the CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and we help companies franchise their business and launch into market, working primarily with emerging brand franchisors. And very often, we tend to be a great fit for just starting franchise brands as well as very mature brands. We tend to be a good fit for. And so today we're going to go through several data sets as it pertains to the economic conditions that we're all seeing and facing and what's happening and trying to make sense of all of this. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. And for those of you who have joined us in the past, you may, there's the share screen button. You may recall seeing some of these different facts and data and information points that we've shared in the past, but I thought this would be a good starting point for us to take a look at here. So I always like starting with the Institute for Supply Management report. They have a PMI report, Purchasing Managers Index report, which surveys purchasing managers in these different fields. And this is an interesting one because the manufacturing is a great indicator in terms of what is coming in the future for the American economy and the global economy at large, but especially specifically as it pertains to America and the North American economy here. So manufacturing grew again last month. So this data is as fresh as it gets. This is data from November. These reports come out, I believe, the first week in the following month. So this just came out. It's the 11th here within the last, 5-7 days, this data came out. And what it shows is that the purchasing manufacturers are showing growth at 57%. The baseline is 50%. So if it's under 50%, that means it's contracting. Anything over means that it's growing. So the growth rate was not quite as much as we saw in the month of October, but it was still substantial. And in fact, it looks like it's the second highest we've seen all year for a growth rate, and really even since 2018. And we talk about this when we look at the reports from last month and the last few months. If you're new and joining in, I always like to remind you of noticing this trend. If you look at the 2019 trend for manufacturing and the growth rate, look at here. This was right around July or August. Manufacturing went negative. And that's a leading indicator that the economy was contracting. So as most recessions had happened, there's a trigger. We were already probably heading towards some kind of a recessionary type of economic condition, but the trigger hadn't happened. And in this case, it was the coronavirus that triggered it. So just some food for thought. Now, I'm going to go through some subsections here that are really interesting to take a look at. So if you take a look at new orders coming in, that spiked again here. So it dipped a little bit in September, spiked in October, and it's up high again in November. That's a very good thing. Production is up. You see it's hovering around this 60% growth rate here. Employment it dipped down here a little bit in November. It's hovering around that 50% line. So, it's bouncing right around that 50%. So that's interesting. It's worth noting to see where it goes. In general, as you can see from the crash here, where unemployment was dipping here, the crash hit and unemployment started coming up again. We're going to see what that looks like. It looks like it's starting to zigzag a little bit. We'll see where it goes. Remains to be seen, but something worth noting. Supplier deliveries, you can take a look at that and see that it's trending up here. And inventories, is hovering right around that 50% again. So anyway, just some points to take a look at in manufacturing, which is a very critical industry or segment of the economy. I also like to take a look at. I think I stopped sharing my screen. Hold on, let me bring it back here. All right, there we go. We're back. Okay, I was trying to zoom in a little bit on this, so hopefully you can see that. All right, there we go. So the Purchasing Managers Index shows that again, the services industry is high. It's up high, and you can see that during that 2019 period. If we were to look back at the manufacturing, you see the trend really started dropping in manufacturing. Services started dipping in 2019, but not nearly as severely. And look at it starting to spike again the first part of 2020. So it's almost kind of coming back up for maybe another growth run there, dipped and it popped back up. So, services is the largest segment of the economy. It's a good thing for us as a whole. And then this is the Hospital Purchasing Managers Index. Look at the growth, 62.6%. You can see this is a relatively new report. They started in 2018. But again, I think that this is, again, from the Institute for Supply Management, same place for the previous two reports that came out. But I think it's interesting to take a look at what's happening with hospitals, certainly with the coronavirus and the COVID-19, all of the tests and people just, getting tested for this, the vaccines that will be coming out and administered. I would imagine we're going to continue to see the hospital sector and the PMI to be growing. My speculation is that it'll be growing for the next, at least through 2021 and maybe into 2022. But, all good signs there for you to take a look at. Excuse me. The next piece I like to take a look at is retail traffic and what's happening. If you recall, last month when we looked at it, retail traffic was all the way down here. We did the session around this time, and retail traffic was really low. I mean, it really bottomed out. We see a spike here. I'm sure Halloween helped contribute to this little spike here at the end of October, and we see it fall off that first week into November, and then things picked up again, maybe contributed by Thanksgiving, and it dropped down again the week of Thanksgiving. Here's the 24th, day before. I think that was the day before Thanksgiving, kind of popped back up. It's trickled down, and now it's back up again into the first week or two week into December. So as a whole, it's down 15.6%. But if you see where we were last in November, the last time we did this, we were down 40%, 30%, pretty significant. It was the lowest point we were at in retail foot traffic since the pandemic hit. So, that was a little concerning when we saw that. And now things have popped back up, and it's been hovering around this 15 to 20% reduction number here. As you can see my cursor, I'm kind of circling and hovering around that. Hopefully you're not getting dizzy. So I think that's an interesting point to see. And here we are, December 4th. Here are some different states to show retail traffic, to show if it's up or down by state. So if it's in green, that means retail traffic is actually up since February 3rd. That means traffic is trending up. So you see South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. We've got Alaska and Hawaii, Montana. Traffic is up. And then as you move over to these lighter colored states, some of these like Colorado's down 6.9%, Utah down 1.6%. These light colored oranges are not far off. North Carolina, Tennessee, and then you've got these darker colors. Illinois down 41%, California down 33%, Minnesota down 46%. And I would imagine that much of this, these dark orange states, a lot of it, I'm certain, can be attributed to just different governors and mayors of large cities that have been shutting down restaurants and retailers and other operators in the space. So anyway, just kind of an interesting thing to see and to make note of. Let's go ahead and click over here. So, all right, this is from Franchise Insights. I love the reports that they put out. This is brand new, hot off the press. I think it came out within the last week here. This is the this is the anticipated business startups 4 to 6 months out from now. It says it reaches a 2020 high. Okay, this was published December 3rd here. So that was about 8 days ago. And what we can see here for the month of November is the Entrepreneur Startup Index. So this is taking a broad cross section of just people that are thinking about opening a business. And these people are getting surveyed right now in the month of November. So the survey for November were people getting surveyed in the month of November. They were being asked these questions. They were thinking about buying a franchise or starting their own business. They were getting asked these questions, and the data is really interesting. So the purple or this magenta type color says planning to buy or start a business this month. And look at this trend here coming up the last 3 months. It hit a low in September from the high in August. So August was high. September dropped, it built again in October, and it's up again in November. So planning to buy or start a business now is trending up again. That, I think, is a good thing. We see the next 3 months, that's been trailing down here a little bit. So it's probably picking up some ground with the planning to buy this month crowd, where some folks are leaving that next 3 months and they're looking to do it now. And then we also see this 4 to 6 months uptick here, which is an interesting number. So we're looking 4 to 6 months out. And the article here, to summarize it, essentially says, is speculating to tie this in conjunction with the release of the coronavirus vaccine, or the COVID-19 vaccine that's getting released and starting to come out. And the idea, thinking that we'll be through the traditional flu season by the end of first quarter, and by second quarter, vaccines will have been rolling out. The warmer weather will be coming. The flu season will be passing. So hopefully the worst of the pandemic by Q2, second quarter here in 2021, will be behind us. Keeping our fingers crossed that the worst will be behind us here. But just some interesting telling data for those of you, and those of us, I should say, in the franchise sales business about the Startup Sentiment Index. One other thing I wanted to show was the unemployment rate here that just was published. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on this. But this is the unemployment rate seasonally adjusted November of 2018 to November of 2020. It's this chart here. So you can see this unemployment rate is down here to about it's just over, it's at 6.7%. The rate is down from 8 percentage points in April, but is 3.2 percentage points higher than it was in February. Oh boy, my speaker just decided to go crazy here. Hold on one second. Let me see what we can do here. All right, let's see if it stops screaming at me. All right, much better. Every once in a while, the speaker will jump up and yell at me there. So I got some static and feedback in my ears. Uh, anyway, when we look at the unemployment rate, it's great to see this number trending down. But what it also means for franchise sales professionals and people in the franchise industry is that the unemployment rate is still up. And as the longer people are unemployed, the more likely they are to end up considering alternatives to finding a job, which ultimately leads to self-employment. And so self-employment inevitably thinks, well, maybe I'll start a business. What kind of business? Maybe they'll start an independent business, maybe a sole proprietor. Some of them will do that. And some of them will also then think about buying a franchise. And so that should continue for into 2021. I see a lot of folks that are sitting, they've been unemployed maybe now for 3 months, 6 months, and they're getting antsy. They need to get work, they need to find income. And so that will lead to people wanting to do something. And as we go through that, I want to showcase this. I think that this is a very interesting thing. So this is Google Trends, and I just typed in the phrase "buy a franchise" here, and I did this right before the session started. I did this about 30 minutes ago. I just pulled this report, and this is the search term for Google Trends over the last 5 years. And 100 means the max times that search term has been searched. 50, if it's under 50%, that means it's just at an average search volume. So I just want to kind of point out something that's kind of neat to see over the last 5 years. So here we are. Let's take a look at 2020 here. Okay, so you can see here is, for example, this is October of last year was around 75. The score was around 75. Here's where the recession or the pandemic hit. You can kind of see this fall off here, but you see it spike up pretty quick. July and August, we saw a spike in searches for the search term "buy a franchise." It dropped a little bit. It dipped at the end of September. And look at what we see here coming through middle of November, dropped week of Thanksgiving, and here it is popping up again this week. It's at some of the highest. Look at this. It's at the highest rating all year in the last 4 weeks. 2 of the last 4 weeks, we're seeing the highest volume for the search term "buy a franchise" in the last 4 weeks. So if you want to think about what that could mean going into 2021, my interpretation of that is I see this coming out as this meaning that leads that are coming in now are preemptively planning for what's going to happen in 2021. They're trying to get a jump and get a lead and get some interest for what's happening and being ready for 2021. So I think that's a really important component and a really important just little takeaway in looking at this data here. Those are, I've got one more report. I thought that was it, but nope, I'm wrong. I've got one more report. So this is the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. We saw a highlight of that here, okay? But I downloaded the full report that came out December 3rd and just wanted to show you a few additional numbers. And the one that I was most interested in showing you was this chart right here. Let me see if I can move this and zoom in a little bit. Hopefully that's a little bit better for you all as you're viewing this. All right. So as we take a look at what this question here, this is, what are the concerns about political, what are the concerns, your biggest concerns or biggest barrier? This is to business startup. What's your biggest barrier to business startup? And just to give you an idea, they're asked about funding or access to credit, the economic climate, the stock market, political changes, regulatory changes, tax law changes, and other. And then the blue line is January, and then this orange or reddish orange is February, the yellow is March, the green is purple, this other orange color is May, a light turquoise is June, this kind of purple blue is July, another reddish color is August, another yellow is September, then October and November. And you can kind of see these colors. And what's interesting is that over 60% of the respondents consistently said all year their number one concern was access to capital. So all of the things we're hearing about what's going on and what's their real concern and what are they really worried about, the number one concern still remains as access to capital. Number two is the economic climate. And look at March here when the pandemic really struck nationally, it almost hit 60%. I mean, that was a big, big jump from February where it was down to less than 25%, what it looks like here. And you see that kind of ebb and flow over the course of the year, but there was a noticeable spike in that once the pandemic hit. Concerns about the stock market. So it crashed really went down hard in March. And then as the stock market has bounced back, you see the concern reduce. This is my favorite graph of the whole thing. My favorite chart is political changes. That's my favorite. Just it's an election year, and you can literally see the concern for the political changes. It just accelerates the whole year. I don't know. I just get a chuckle out of that because people get in a frenzy. The closer you get to election year, political ads start getting more robust and more frequent. And so you see here up until November, it's kind of peaking there. And so I would imagine in December, it'll shrink down a little bit. And, by Q1, it'll really start falling back, getting a little bit lower there. So I thought that was interesting. And then we have regulatory changes and tax law changes. So we saw a little spike here in tax law changes that happened. We'll see if that concern happens. I wonder if tax law changes, if that's just because we're coming up to the end of the year and people are thinking about the end of the year and taxes, or if it maybe has something to do with the current election that happens and with a changing Congress and your local, in your state and federal governments, I should say. Maybe that leads to tax implications there, depending on the elected officials. So that is our overview here. I know I covered a lot and went through a lot, but the goal is to hopefully give you some snapshots and some data to see what in the world is happening out there and a quick synopsis here. So I know we've got a few folks on the line. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, or even just what you're hearing or seeing out in the market in general? See if anything, you feel free to type that in the chat box or unmute yourself if you'd like to. All right, no questions. That means maybe I covered it all. I hope not. I hope there are questions. Well, great. Well, hopefully this was some beneficial information to you. Remember, we do these every week. We do these generally every Friday at noon Eastern. Occasionally we change the time. We'll have one next week. We will be taking the week of Christmas and New Year's Day off. So the last 2 weeks of the year, we will be taking off from our webinar series, but we will be back in 2021 with some fantastic content. So we plan on being back here next week. We've got a fantastic guest coming on and presentation for you. And please make sure to subscribe to our podcast if you're looking for a daily dose or a weekly dose of inspiration and some great experts and entrepreneurs who have some great insight to share. Multiply Your Success podcast is a great opportunity to get some additional information. So thank you all for tuning in and enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you back here next Friday for the next edition of the continuing or for navigating the coronavirus economy.